Dear viewer, have you really locked me in this accursed crystal ball until I tell you my predictions for 2024? Puh, good lord, I thought we were better friends than this. But very well, you want my predictions? Then Hextradamus will give you them. Titanically. Every year on January 1st, I make 5 predictions on what I think is going to happen in the year to come, with the chance of them actually happening decreasing with every prediction until we end on my wild card, which is always truly crazy. But I also like to take a look at what predictions I made the year before and grade how accurate they were, with green meaning that I was spot on, yellow meaning that I was kind of right, and red meaning that I was completely wrong. So without further ado, let's take out the blackboard and take a gander at what my predictions were for 2023, so that you can either gaze upon my genius or scoff at my stupidity. Starting with number 1. Islam will surge in popularity in the Western world. As the West under neoliberalism continues to socially and economically decline, a large chunk of the wisest of Westerners, particularly Christians, will be humbled and soften their hearts to the idea of Islam. Chance of happening? 90%. Yeah, I'm going to give myself a yellow for that one, and there's a very simple reason why. Technically, I think I was correct that Islam has definitely increased in popularity in the Western world in 2023. However, I was also wrong about what side of the political aisle that Islam would increase in popularity with. You see, Islam in the West is in quite an unusual position because, let's say, this is Islam. The West is currently going through a culture war, as we all know, between the left and the right. And Islam kind of corresponds with both of these factions, but at the same time opposes them in different ways. So, for example, Islam resonates very strongly with the West in its colonialism. It opposes colonialism very strongly. But it sides with the right in the sense that its worldview is very much the same as the right. And so, for example, for those who don't believe that, because many people don't, I mean, belief in God, support for LGBT, feminism support, let's just take these 3 things. I mean, conservatives obviously believe in God. They don't support LGBT. They don't support feminism, right? And Muslims, you could pretty much copy and paste this same thing: belief in God, support for LGBT, feminism support. Like the bare bone basics worldview is the same. Now, obviously, there are many differences between, say, Muslims and Christians and Muslims and atheists who are conservative in the West, obviously. But the worldview, the basic worldview of Islam is in complete opposition to progressivism. However, these groups find themselves close together due to opposing colonialism. And my belief system was Muslims in the West will realize that they're going to have to side with the conservatives, and conservatives in the West are going to have to realize that they actually have a lot in common with the Muslims, and they will form they will not merge, because this is a matter of religion, obviously, it's not that simple, but they'll form a sort of alliance of convenience against the progressives who stand against their worldview, which makes sense on paper. However, what I didn't anticipate was, of course, that the Israel and Palestine conflict, which is seen by the left and Muslims as essentially colonialism, is ongoing. And not only is it ongoing, but it's heated up. And, because this doesn't affect me personally on a day-to-day basis, this is a blind spot for me. And so, I've been focused so much on the Western world and the way that our worldview is under attack or is changing, that I've kind of viewed Muslims as a sort of natural ally, even though the Muslims in the West are considered to be a sort of another civilization, if you would, hence the natural opposition. I kind of thought, well, it's kind of inevitable that these two groups must form an alliance. But no, instead, actually, the opposite has occurred, where Muslims have not moved to the left, but have formed an alliance of convenience with the left because of the Israel and Palestine ramp up. And this has sort of resulted in the conservatives just going in the opposite direction, right? Just like supporting Israel because, well, Muslims are siding with the West, or the left is siding with Muslims, and so conservatives are going to do the opposite. At least the older conservatives, not so much the younger ones, but that's a story for another time. But yeah, this has led to an unusual world where you have, mindless teenagers on the left on TikTok who are reading Bin Laden's letter to America, saying that he had a point. I mean, I bet no one had that on their predictions list for this year. Which is, of course, they ignore the parts where Bin Laden also talks about how, America is supposedly the worst civilization on earth because they don't really believe in God and support gambling and all this other stuff. They ignore that part, but they laser focus on the colonial part. So I do think overall, however, that while emotions are currently high due to the ramp up of this conflict, if Muslims in the West keep forming an alliance with the left, and this becomes permanent, what they may not realize is that Islam in the West will essentially transform in the same way Christianity did, which means that Islam will essentially cease to be Islam, and that and that would be terrible for Muslims, obviously, if you believe in the faith, but it would also be terrible for Islam at large worldwide, because Muslims are making a grave mistake if they think that the left cares about Islam, cares about Muslims. They don't. They care about... The reason they talk about Palestine is because of their false racial hierarchy that they've created, and it makes them feel like a good person if they wave a flag around, a Palestinian flag around. They don't actually care about the region, the religion, or anything about it. It's an alliance of convenience, perhaps, but it's an alliance of convenience that will lead to nowhere. Whereas this alliance of convenience here would actually lead to an unstoppable force that would radically change the West for the better and the world for the better. I know this is really... I can't summarize this up like now, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how this... how Islam in the West unfolds. Will it stay on its own? Will it carry on an alliance of convenience with the left, or will it form an alliance of convenience with the right? Who knows? But it's going to be interesting to see either way. Which brings us on to number 2. Apple will release an AR headset that will change everything. Touted as the inevitable replacement to the iPhone, Apple will wow the world with a headset that can be worn to enhance the user's reality. Chance of happening, 80%. Yeah, and of course this was a green, and some of you may wonder, how did I know that was going to happen? A simple reason is because Apple, as I said, it didn't just become a multi-trillion-dollar corporation for no reason. Apple became as big of a business as it is because it geniusly combines two human elements that usually companies only understand one. They understand like the design, the psychology of design, that kind of what appeals to people, the simplicity, the ease of use, the non-technicality of products. But they also actually are quite inventive. Not inventive in the sense that they create original technology, but kind of in the Blizzard entertainment way, where they take an already existing idea and polish it up. It's clear that the smartphone market is I won't say declining, but it's reached its peak of innovation. There's not much really going on. You've entered the realm of gimmicks now, where you have like foldables and things like that. The smartphone has matured. You compare like an iPhone 3 and then a 3G and then an iPhone 6. They were very different just a few years apart. You compare an iPhone 10 and an iPhone 15, and yeah, there's some differences, but you could live without them. It's plateaued. It's slowing down, and so I knew Apple, if it wants to keep its shareholders happy, is going to have to find a new product to create an ecosystem around, because that's what Apple does. They use their design and inventiveness to create an ecosystem of products and keep people within them, and they overlap with their other products, and so they need a new product. They need a new something new to drag people in, a sort of new iPhone. And to me, it's been quite obvious what that's going to be, and that's going to be a wearable piece of technology, a headset of sorts. And I don't mean these clunky things that we have today, but a real, like something where you really feel like you're augmented or you're in a virtual reality. Like and of course the Vision Pro that they've announced, or whatever the hell it's called, I can't even remember the name, to be honest. It's very expensive, very pricey, as predicted, and not many people will get it. But it'll be like the bedrock that they will build subsequent versions upon, and then by the time you get to about Generation 4, it'll be much more affordable, and you know, kind of like smartphones were. You know, I strongly believe in a concept that I call... So you have Internet 1.0... and Internet 2.0. I strongly believe in a concept called Internet 2.0. Internet 1.0 is what you're using right now. Like you're looking at the world through screens, right? Like whether you're using a phone, a tablet, a desktop, laptop, whatever, you're watching this or listening to this through a flat display, I assume. Whereas in the future, you're gonna interact with the internet spatially. So you'll be wearing a headset, and you'll be able to, rather than watching me on a flat screen, you may be able to put on the headset, and if I had the right camera technology or with artificial intelligence, you might be able to simulate being in the same room as me. God forbid, right? But you know, you, for example, when you buy something from Amazon or some online store, rather than looking at a flat page or whatever, you'll be able to actually visit an Amazon store virtually and try out the product and look around with it. And you know, Apple already does this already with where you can go on their website, augment a product of theirs via your smartphone or tablet in your physical dimension. And many people find this dystopian. They say like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. Like this is, personally, I think there's nothing more dystopian than Internet 1.0. Internet 2.0 is an upgrade. Internet 1.0 it's like people are alone in a dark room looking at a screen all day. There's nothing more dystopian than that. It does your back in, your arms start hurting, your fingers start hurting. That's awful. And you have no physical contact, or at least a simulation of physical contact with people. That's the most dystopian thing imaginable. You consume media through text, right? People communicate mostly through text. That's dystopian. Internet 2.0 will be merging the bridge between the virtual and reality. That's not dystopian, that's a good thing. Well, or at least, even if it's not a good thing, it's certainly an improvement to now. Right, so imagine rather than, you know, in Discord, there's this feature called theatre mode or something like that, where you can watch videos together. Well, imagine that, but you'll actually be in a theatre, and you'll have a screen, and you can actually see your friends next to you. And they can be in all parts of the world. You could know someone in America, Europe, Australia. They could be all next to each other. That's cool. That's not dystopian. You know, I'm kind of tired of people saying that just because some technology is new, it's dystopian. No, you're just getting old. You know, boomers said the same things about the internet, like, oh, it was a fad. Well, you know, come back to me 20 years from now and we'll see how much Internet 2.0 is a fad. It won't be. It's inevitable. Which brings us on to number 3. My channel will significantly stagnate or even outright die as I become increasingly unpopular. Uncomfortable truths about conservatism, gaming, Christianity, and other topics will render huge rage upon me for speaking the facts. Chance of happening, 70%. Yeah, I'm going to give myself a green on that one as well, and I'll explain, you know, why I made this prediction in the first place, because it is quite a weird one to predict your own sort of I don't know, not demise. I think that's a bit dramatic, but a hurdle. So, at the start of the year, after doing sociological productions on YouTube for a year, I had a little bit of a hypothesis, and the hypothesis was that when people watch people on YouTube, they put them in a little box, right? And everyone does this. You do this, I do this, everyone does this. So they put the YouTuber that they watch in a little box, and they give the YouTubers a label, whatever that label may be, whether it be, conservative or liberal or, I don't know, fool, or just something. Like they give them a label, and this justifies the reason why they watch them. So a conservative will label someone who on YouTube a conservative, or label them a liberal, or label them a fool, and that's the reason they watch them, right? Now, however, the problem is that people most people on YouTube, I would say, are quite one-dimensional, because the key to doing well on YouTube is obviously reliability. Like, you know, you find an audience, and you keep giving that audience what they want, and that's like the key to success, and not just on YouTube but on business. However, I've always thought to myself, that's kind of lame, to be honest with you, and I think when you're doing sociological productions, you can't be put in a box, because there's this phenomenon that happens to people called audience capture. And audience capture is essentially like, you want to make things, you want to talk about things, but you can't because your audience has already labelled you something. And if you leave that label, so if people think you're conservative and then you come out with a liberal point of view, people aren't going to like that. People really don't like that. People feel betrayed, like you've lied to them. And I know, considering a lot of the productions that I make is making the case for social conservatism, that people label me conservative, which is true. However, the reality is that if you make sociological things, you can't be idealistic. You've got to be somewhat pragmatic, in the sense that not everything has a conservative solution, actually, and that the reason why roughly 50% of the population find themselves being liberal or progressive or whatever is that there's some things in these ideologies that are actually right. Right, and that if your main goal is to solve the sociological problems we face today, you can't just be conservative 100% of the time. You have to make some liberal points of view. You have to break outside of the box. You have to prevent audience capture. I think that the sign of a bad YouTube video is when someone clicks on a video and it's exactly what they expected. You know, why is it that conservatives watch conservatives? Why is it that liberals watch liberals? It's because people don't want to hear new perspectives. They want to hear back things they already think in a nicer voice than them. And so I think really success is when people click on a video and they leave and it wasn't what they expected, or it was kind of like, I never thought of it that way. That's true like sociological understanding. It's like you're literally thinking outside the box. You're not thinking in the box. Like, nothing annoys me more on YouTube than like pure conservative or pure progressive channels, or even streamers or whatever, because I already know what they're going to say before they open their mouths, and it's because they're interested in cultivating a personal brand that people can sort of channel their energies into, that makes them money and gives them attention. And I just think that's a bunch of bollocks, quite frankly. I mean, obviously, if you make things, you want people to watch them, but I would rather have a smaller audience who can comprehend, not being in a box, and can sort of break through the ideological airwaves, if you would, rather than a bunch of morons who just want to be told the same thing time and time again, right? Does that make sense? And so I never want to get captured by the audience, and I don't want to patronize the audience. I don't want to tell the audience things that they're probably already aware. I want to kind of challenge the audience and say, listen, you're an intelligent person. What do you think of this? And if you think it's right, tell me, and if you think it's wrong, tell me. But I don't just want to feed you slop, If anyone ever watches anything I see and they think it's slop, I've failed. And to give you an example of this in action, two productions I made this year specifically. I made one called The Enemy Explained. One, The Bourgeoisie. Oh God, I hate spelling bourgeoisie. I know I've not spelled that right, but anyway, the idea of this was, communism is a terrible ideology that's killed millions of people, and it's horrendous. However, and that's a big however, big statement to however, the concept of the bourgeoisie, which is this small group of elites who are self-serving and abuse the people under them, the workers, is no different to the conservative concept of the globalist or the neoliberal. It's no different. And that's what and so you can take that idea from communism and say communism's poo-poo, but this root idea is probably, which is true, is probably why so many people believed in it, right? A lot of conservatives, as soon as they hear the term bourgeoisie, they tune out, they go, oh, this guy's a communist. They try and put you in the communist box. That's stupidity. So you have to artificially select these people out. Another example, the small farm psyop. I made a production this year about how, a lot of the Western world today, all the institutions of society are taken over by progressives, and this has happened slowly since the 1960s. The way the conservatives have to win again is by taking back the institutions, taking back the education system, the healthcare system, the media especially, things like that. Although a lot of conservatives, particularly online, all they want to do is do this nonsense where they move in the middle of Wyoming and pick berries for the rest of their life on some sort of farm, like this small farm psyop. And this is an idea that has been pushed on them, actually, by progressives, to get them out of mainstream society and isolate them, to make conservatism easier to kill. But it plays on conservative fantasies of being some sort of Fallout character, this lone ranger, right? Like, oh, I exist outside of society, I'm a natural. No, you're a coward. You're running away from mainstream society. You're surrendering, and you've been made to feel like a victor. And a lot of conservatives don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear that's a psyop. They want to return, right? Because everything in the past was better. But that's not true. If you want to win, you have to be brave and take back the institutions. You can't run from conflict. In fact, that's why conservatism is so weak today, because people run from conflict rather than chasing it head on. And so these two productions especially, I made understanding that this would artificially select conservatives. I want to say this in a nice way, but dumb conservatives, not smart conservatives, but dumb conservatives, away from these productions. And unfortunately, that was very much a success. So it is what it is. Which brings us on to number 4. Biden will announce he will not run for president in 2024. Near the end of the year, Biden will step aside as the Democratic candidate for president, starting a contest of succession. Chance of happening, 50%. Yeah, this was obviously a red, it didn't happen. However, I've got to say, I'm absolutely baffled that it didn't happen. And I still think that Biden will not be the 2024 candidate for the United States. I just don't see that happening. The guy was basically half dead when I made this prediction a year ago. Today, he's half underground. In a year from now, I can't imagine how he's going to be. I don't see how the Democratic Party of the United States can possibly have this guy as the candidate. He doesn't inspire confidence. He doesn't, if you want to, I think most political leaders, they've either got to inspire respect, which is kind of like what Obama had. Like, people respected Obama. You might not like him, but you can respect him. Like, he came across as a statesman. Biden isn't like that because he can't get his words out, right? So people don't respect him. Or you have to be fierce, right? Like, Trump is obviously very fierce. Like, even if you don't like Trump, you've got to admit he packs a fight, right? He doesn't give up, this guy. And you wouldn't want to be his enemy because he'll just drag you through the mud. Like, you've got to be feared or respected, I guess you could say. And Biden doesn't fit any of these. He's trying to do this thing where he comes across as like Mr. Nice Guy. But in times of conflict, people don't want Mr. Nice Guy. They want someone they can respect and someone who's fierce. And pretty much any Republican in opposition to him has those traits, and he doesn't. I don't see how the Democratic Party can't possibly replace him. I think this prediction was just made too early. I think it will happen in 2024, but hey, I don't want to waste another prediction on that, considering I've not been right so far. So yeah, it is what it is. I think this was a prediction that was probably made too early. Which brings us on lastly to the wild card, number 5. Russia will use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. Tired of Western donations that are proving very costly for Russia, Putin will unleash a nuclear weapon in a remote part of Ukraine as a warning to the world to back off. Chance of happening, 20%. And yeah, I wasn't right on this either, but that's to be expected considering this was the wild card. At the time, you've got to understand, at the time of this war, and this is what made me think about this, Ukraine, kind of pretend this is Ukraine. I know that doesn't look like Ukraine, but pretend it is. And this is Russia. Again, it doesn't look like Russia. Kind of looks like, if I draw a face on that, it's kind of like an animal. But, it kind of looked like Ukraine was doing not bad against Russia, because, like, the West was sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, and it kind of seemed like they were holding their ground. And I kind of hypothesized that the Russian public and the political scene would kind of be very, very unstable, because this would just seem as throwing men in the meat grinder. And eventually people would go, well, is this war worth it? Because we're not winning. However, what's actually ended up happening is that it's kind of been a stalemate for a year, and the Western world is getting much more angsty, and a lot of countries, specifically the United States, less so the European Union, and more so Western Europe. Eastern Europe overwhelmingly supports Ukraine, but Western Europe kind of thinks, well, we have our own problems, so we don't want to spend money on foreign aid for Ukraine. And so, Russia's kind of hanging in there. And so, but my logic was that if it seemed like Russia was going to lose, they would nuke some forest in Ukraine, and then the West would poop its pants. Again, it's not happened. I'm glad that's not happened. I'm glad we're not living in Fallout 5. But, it probably wasn't going to happen anyway. But it was just like a slight possibility that fortunately did not happen. So overall for 2023, I had 1 yellow, 2 greens, and 2 reds, which, believe it or not, mathematically adds up for an exact 50% accuracy rate. Which, isn't good, but also isn't bad either, so hey, I'll take it. But enough about my predictions. What about your predictions? At the start of 2023, I asked you all how you believed the year would be, and from that, 25% of you said it would be amazing, another 25% said it would be decent, 26% of you said it would be meh, and 24% of you said it would be awful. Which was, overall, needless to say, quite the balanced poll. But now that the year is actually over, I asked you all, how has the year 2023 been to you? And from that, just 13% of you said it was amazing, 35% of you said it was decent, 37% of you said it was meh, with just 15% of you saying it was awful. Overall meaning that when you compare how people thought the year would go compared to how people reported it actually did, it turns out that most people's optimistic or pessimistic predictions did not actually correspond into reality. Which is both a good and bad thing, depending on how you look at it, I suppose. Which brings us on nicely to 2024. Oh, I've been waiting for this for so long. Vladimir Lenin, love him or hate him, once said that there are decades where years happen, and years where decades happen. And oh so right he was. For it's time for me to introduce you to the chronomatic concept of Titan years. And no, not those Titans. There are 2 types of years, normal years and Titan years. Normal years are exactly as their name implies. But Titan years are something else. Titan years started in 2008, and they've happened every 4 years since. They are always packed with absolutely game-changing world events, and no one is ever the same person after coming out the other side of them. They aren't about us as individuals, but about us collectively. They feel extremely slow compared to normal years, and they also tend to be unforgettable, for better or worse. 2008, the economic crisis, and the subsequent election of Barack Obama. 2012, the Higgs boson discovery just as the Mayans predicted, and the beginning of the culture war in the Western world. 2016, Brexit, and the election of Donald Trump. And 2020, with the corona pandemic and the global George Floyd protests. Of course, game-changing world events have happened outside of Titan years, such as the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, or the 2023 heating up of the Israel versus Palestine conflict. But these years aren't anything compared to Titan years, as they lack their other unusual properties. Normal years are but blurs in both the history books and memories, but Titan years always stand out. And while to critics they may just sound like mystical jargon akin to something like star signs, it should be noted that similar to how human beings have biological clocks that can sync with each other, so too is this logic shared with mass order and chaos. And it just so happens that the next Titan year we face is in 2024. Therefore, while this isn't strictly a prediction, it should be known that 2024 will absolutely feel different compared to the last few years, as well as having a certain unique energy about it, for better or worse. Predicting what will happen in a Titan year is ultimately a fool's errand, as they're always so wild that anyone who does is likely to just end up looking like a fool. However, you're not going to let me out this crystal ball unless I do, so let's get a move on. Number 1. Europe will have an empty political earthquake. Continental Europe will seemingly move right, while Britain will seemingly move left. But in reality, no meaningful change will actually occur. Chance of happening, 90%. Yeah, so a lot of places are having a crisis, right? So like if you take the United States, just pretend that's an American flag and not a scribble. America has numerous crises, like for example, obesity crisis. Everyone knows about that. Healthcare crisis. Like American healthcare is like constantly under scrutiny. Southern border crisis, right? Southern brother crisis, apparently. Southern border crisis. Like America has a lot of crises. However, America also has a lot of things that is going really well in the United States. For example, its technology sector is the best in the world. America is storming ahead. I mean, it already was ahead. It owns pretty much every big tech company. It's doing really well on hardware, artificial intelligence. It's doing fantastically. Silicon Valley, for all people dislike it, is the hub, the hub of the world's technology. There's no question about that. What else? Tourism. America is an absolutely beautiful country for tourism, and it probably always will be, because it has one of every climate. You want to see a desert, you go to Nevada. You want to see the snow, you go to Alaska. You want to see tropical kind of climate, go to Florida. Millions of people go to America every single year, and they have good things to say about it. What else? Economy. Actually, the American economy doesn't work for everyone, especially poor people. However, the American economy has not stagnated. It continues to, well, it has a little bit, but in the grand scheme, it continues to grow. It continues to thrive. So America it has some crises that it needs to deal with, but there's also a lot of good things that's going on in the United States at the moment. Same thing with a country like China. Pretend this is the Chinese flag. China has some crises as well. For example, it has a sort of housing bubble crisis, right? So China's had a lot of problems with this massive housing bubble that's kind of getting out of hand and getting out of the way. It's got I suppose you could say a human rights crisis, but they don't really see it that way because they have a fundamental different view of the world. At least their government does. But China also has a lot of good things going for him. For example, it's the manufacturing hub of the world. When you buy something, it's probably made in China. What else? It's taken more seriously. Like China, back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s even, was viewed kind of like a joke. People kind of disrespected China. Today, people take China seriously. It's a big superpower. Well, that's the point. People treat it like a superpower. It's a big power in the region, and it's a big power around the world. People don't treat China like it's some sort of second-class nation. They treat it, with respect. Which brings us on to Europe. Europe, both mainland Europe and the European Union, is going through what I like to call a crisis of crisis. Right, in the sense that almost every single thing about Europe as a continent is going down the drain, and there's nothing good. As in, there's nothing that's... to Europeans, I would ask, wherever you're from, is your country better today than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago? And if the answer is yes, you're living on another planet to most people. Because most people would answer no. I can say firsthand that the UK was way better 20 years ago, 10 years ago than it is now. And I'm not very optimistic for the next 10, 20 years either. And most Europeans aren't optimistic. Europe, let's just go through these things that America has. Europe is rapidly becoming obese. Europe rapidly has a healthcare crisis. The National Health Service in the UK is a disaster. We have massive immigration problems, ironically, on our southern border, the Mediterranean. But we don't have a good technology sector. The European Union over-regulates technology. We have no tech companies. We have no big tech companies. Recently, they just passed legislation on artificial intelligence, so we're not going to excel in that either. So we don't have a good technology sector. Tourism's going down the drain because people go to cities like London and Paris and are very disappointed when they see homeless people and crime everywhere, as opposed to these romantic, beautiful cities that they're promised or believed. So that's not going well. The European economy is significantly stagnating. Back in the 1980s, I think the European continent, I think, made up around, I think it was about 30% of world GDP. Now it's about 10%. So it's declining by percentage year on year on year. We have a massive housing crisis. No, young people cannot afford homes, which is spurred on by immigration. The European Union is rapidly, despite all this flaunting of human rights, the European Union has almost no freedom of speech, actively tries to punish websites that have freedom of speech, such as X or Twitter, puts people in jail for hate crimes, speech. And places like the UK have more CCTV than some parts of China. So I find it hard to understand how Europe is a beacon of human rights. In what way? Maybe to criminals, not so much law-abiding citizens. There's hardly any manufacturing happening in Europe anymore, because we gave away our industry, such as places like the north of England to places like China, even Germany, which manufactures cars. I hear that's not going well anymore. And Europe is taken much less seriously than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. We're viewed as an absolute joke. We're viewed as like we're sandwiched between these two nations. We're viewed culturally as America's minion, because they control our media essentially. They set it out. We use their technology. We listen to their songs. We watch their movies. And China has us by the balls in terms of our industry. So what are we? We're going through a crisis of crisis. And the reason why is because Europe is in a state of managed decline. Not decline, managed decline. What's the difference between decline and managed decline? Decline is when a nation declines due to just bad leadership and it's not aware of it. Managed decline is when the leadership is more than aware of it and it's managing that decline. It's almost doing it on purpose. And Europe is ran. The European Union at large is ran by bureaucrats in Brussels who have it's interesting. Most countries put the most talented people in charge of their government, like China. Xi Jinping didn't just become the head of China. He had to become like a local mayor, and he had to apply to join the party like 50 times. He really had to work his way up. Many people will disagree with that. I know there's some controversy about that, but whatever. In Europe, people who fail, we put them in charge. Like Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, is considered a joke in Germany, and yet we made her the head of the European Commission. What are we thinking? We put idiots in charge, and even leaving the European Union doesn't really work, because take the UK. The UK left the European Union a few years ago, and it's still a joke, because the two main parties are still Brussels thinkers. They still think in terms of managed decline. They're convinced that Europe's fate is to just be a loser, and that we should be grateful that we're not treated worse. No, I actually want Europe to be a superpower. I want to believe that Europe's best days are not behind it, but ahead of it. And unfortunately, times are bad in Europe right now, and so people are voting for parties that are the opposite of what's currently in charge. So if you're in a country like the UK, for example, which has been ruled by the right, Conservatives, the Labour Party will sweep the next election, and the left will be in charge. Whereas if you're in a place like Poland, where the right, same thing actually. If you're in a place like Germany, where the left is currently in charge, the right will win. Same in France, where basically Europeans, if things aren't going well, which they're not, will vote for the opposite side in each country. The problem is that both sides in Europe are essentially compromised. How do you know the right wing's compromised? Because all they do is moan about Islam. And Islam is not the root cause of all the problems that we face in Europe. On the contrary, Islam, contrary to popular belief, is actually a good ally for European conservatism. I know you'll think I'm crazy because people conflate Islam with mass migration, but that's not true. Not necessarily, anyway. How do you know the left's compromised? Because all they talk about is wokeness, woke talking points. They don't really do anything about the economy or bringing industry back or lowering immigration, which used to be a left-wing policy. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the European left and right are both compromised. My advice to young Europeans is very simple. In fact, I'll even spell it out for you in no uncertain terms so you don't forget. My advice for young Europeans is, boomers will not save you. Zoomers will save you. That is my advice to Europeans. Boomers and Generation X entered Europe in this state of managed decline. They put us in this mess. Why do you expect them to have whether they're left-wing or right-wing, why do you expect them to save you? It will not be them. It will be the Zoomer generation, the people who are currently in their 20s, who 10, 20, 30 years from now will enter the mainstream of European politics and implement appropriate fixes to the problems we face today, because boomers do not understand the problems that Europe has today, because they haven't had to deal with them. They haven't had to deal with the housing crisis, a poor economy, a terrible education system, etc., etc. They haven't had to deal with that. You cannot rely on boomers, whether left-wing or right-wing, to save you. You know, Europe will basically, the bottom line is Europe will seemingly change a lot politically in 2024, but in reality it will not change at all, because both the left and right are captured. This isn't some sort of demotivating message. If anything, it's a motivating message. It's that if you're someone who is young in Europe, the future lies with you and your age group. It will be our generations that will implement the fixes required to fix Europe. It will not be the people who put us in this state of managed decline in the first place. And that's my prediction. Which brings us on to number 2. A world leader will be assassinated by a citizen of their own nation. Similar to the death of American President John F. Kennedy or Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, an assassination will occur on another world leader that will spawn a myriad of conspiracies for decades to come. Chance of happening, 60%. Yeah, so not many people know this, but actually 2024, in terms of like the entire, like the globe, is going to be the year where the most amount of people in human history will vote, period. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of big elections in 2024 that happen to coincide. For example, you have the USA, you've got the UK, you've got India, and I think you've got EU-wide elections, but yeah. And so there's over 1 billion people who is going to vote in the world in 2024. Obviously, this is times of great political strife, and in times of great political strife, political violence increases, and the frustration that people receive when they lose elections is paramount. I mean, look at the last American election, let's say. And so, to me, it seems like a sort of political assassination of sorts. It would be more shocking if it didn't happen, right? It would be more shocking if you have over 1 billion people voting on Earth in times of great social and economic conflict, religious conflict, ethnic conflict, like every conflict. It seems unlikely to me that some sort of world leader will not undergo a terrible fate. And I don't have any specific prediction as to who, whether it be an American, whether it be British, whether it be Indian, European. I have no idea. I just have this feeling that, as I said, if this doesn't happen, which would be a good thing, obviously, I'd be surprised. Right? I'd be more surprised if this didn't happen than if it did. Statistically, I don't know what you. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. I've got no other logic about that whatsoever, other than the state of the world and the amount of people voting, and a lot of contentious elections. So we'll see, I guess, but hopefully not. Which brings us on to number 3. A clear new era of internet culture will begin. Commonalities like Wojaks will start to go out of style due to reaching maximum popularity, and anyone using them will start to be mocked as a new era of internet culture begins, ushering in new memes, slang, and e-celebrities that highly stands out in comparison to the years before. Chance of happening, 50%. Yeah, so I have a little bit of an unusual concept about internet culture. This is the logo of the internet, the Internet Explorer logo. As far as I'm concerned, that will always be the logo of the internet. But I have a little bit of a theory about internet culture. Internet culture is obviously very interesting because it's global, and it's very detached from reality. You have a lot more unusual people on the internet who are very disconnected from the real world, and that means a lot more extreme views, extreme over-exaggerations that are not necessarily representative of reality, but can be a little bit. And so I have a little bit of a concept about internet culture that I call Genesis and Exodus. I wonder if you can guess where I got that from. So basically, you have some websites on the internet that I call Genesis websites, and some that I call Exodus websites. So what are Genesis websites? 4chan, YouTube, random body building forums, right? These places are Genesis. And then you have Exodus. These are places like Facebook, Reddit, Instagram. I'll add X/Twitter in Genesis as well, though that used to be Exodus. Basically, Genesis websites are websites that create internet culture. And the reason they're allowed to create internet culture is because they're relatively uncensored. Obviously, YouTube is kind of censored. Twitter used to be censored a lot. But they're not censored enough in the sense that people can speak their mind for the most part, and people can freely exchange ideas. And I mean, what am I doing right now? I'm exchanging an idea to you right now, right? And this is kind of promoted and supported on these websites. Like, this is viewed as a good thing. Whether you like these websites or not, you will find that almost everything to do with internet culture spawned from Genesis websites. Wojaks, slang, memes, they almost always originate here. And then what ends up happening is that they end up moving slowly to Exodus websites, where it's almost like a second-hand piece of clothing. Like, these guys wore it first, and then it gets passed down to Facebook for the boomers, for Reddit, for the soy-jack millennials, and even that soy-jack millennial, where did that originate from? And Instagram for people with no brain, right? And so Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram, they don't really make anything original for the most part. Like, when was it? Take Reddit. When was the last time anything original came out of Reddit? Like, the most notorious thing that came out of Reddit was like mocking hardcore atheists. But even that didn't come from Reddit. It came from Genesis websites mocking Reddit, right? Like, these places don't create anything because they're too censored, and the user base who uses them is either too old, too stubborn, or foolish, to put it nicely. However, I think that right now, at the start of 2024, the Genesis websites and the Exodus websites are pretty much identical in culture. And that's how you know that something new is on the horizon, because these Genesis websites don't like being the same as Exodus websites. They don't like it. And so I think that the Genesis websites throughout 2024 are going to not declare, this sounds like an organized group, it isn't, but it's just people. Like, they're just going to notice, like, oh, why are Facebook boomers and Redditors using Wojaks and all like incelian slang and all this stuff? They're not going to like that. And so they're going to manufacture new things throughout the year that will take at least until 2026 for the Exodus websites to catch up. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that new slang, new memes, new nonsense, right, is going to and new e-celebrities, whether it be streamers or YouTubers or whatever, are going to come to the forefront throughout 2024 in the same way that they did with like 2016 and 2020, right? Like, I think 2016 you had like the Pepe thing that was used by Genesis websites and then eventually reached Exodus websites. You had like the NPC meme eventually reached, basically what I'm trying to say is that current internet culture is stale, and I think that it's going to go the way of the dodo, and I think we're going to get new things, and 2024 will stand out specifically, just like 2016, just like 2020, as a year of great Genesis creation, and the Exodus websites are not going to be ready, in my opinion. I'm curious if, by the way, if you think that this is correct. Like, do you think that the Genesis websites are real? From what I can see, these websites have a ridiculously disproportionate like creative abilities. Like, they have these have a lot of users, but this has a. By the way, I don't mean all of YouTube. By the way, I don't mean mainstream YouTube. I mean like niche YouTube, kind of like this. But anyway, I don't know if you agree with that. Curious if you do, but yeah, that's what I think. Which brings us on to number 4. Google will dethrone OpenAI as the frontrunner in the artificial intelligence race. OpenAI's ChatGPT and DALL-E will fall behind to an updated version of Google's multimodal model, Gemini, that will even start to be used in physical robotics. Chance of happening? 40%. Yeah, so when it comes to the artificial intelligence arms race, OpenAI, their logo kind of looks like a maelstrom from WoW. Like that, pretend that's OpenAI's logo. OpenAI is pretty much the king. Right? Whenever people think about AI, they think of OpenAI. Obviously, for the very simple reason, it made ChatGPT, it made DALL-E. I like DALL-E more than ChatGPT, I think, but some people don't. All right, so these guys are like the king of AI. However, I think in 2024, the king is going to lose their crown to Google with Google Gemini. Pretend that's Google Gemini's logo. So no more crown for OpenAI. I think Google will be the new king. And you might say, why is that? Very simple. And I could be wrong about this, but in my opinion, OpenAI has some problems. Its first problem is it's very start-uppy, if that makes sense. So obviously, OpenAI had some controversy back in November with their CEO, with their CEO being ousted from the company and then brought back almost instantly later, and then the company just tries to pretend that didn't happen. That's a very start-uppy thing to do. That wouldn't happen in Google. Google is a very established company, very stable company. Yes, they might have some flops like Google Stadia, but artificial intelligence isn't a gimmick, and it's not going to flop. Artificial intelligence is here to stay. It's the next big technological breakthrough. Google is heavily investing in it. So, and I think that, so Google has that much more professional culture. Not only that, but Google has more compute power from what I've been able to read. They have a lot more hardware on hand. OpenAI is kind of struggling from what I can see, and though it has Microsoft as a backer, surely Microsoft must be kind of unimpressed with the way OpenAI is going lately. Not only that, but I find it to, and maybe this links into the very start-uppy thing, but I find them to be very unprofessional. A lot of OpenAI employees have Twitter accounts where they kind of like tease the public, and there's a lot of leaks coming out of the company from numerous different sources, and there's a lot of rumors, many things unsubstantiated. It feels like a marketing tactic that's going to backfire if they can't deliver on these. Like there's rumors that they've achieved artificial general intelligence. I don't believe that, and I hope they have, but I don't believe that. I think it's all a bunch of hot air. I also very much like the Google Gemini. Google Gemini, like OpenAI's philosophy has been like modular. Like they've made ChatGPT and then DALL-E, and they've made them separately from what I've been able to gather, and then they're trying to merge them together. Gemini seems like a multimodal model, so it seems like it's been made for all reasons, like image generation, chat. It's like it's been made like that from the ground up. It's not like a bunch of mishmashes put together. Now look, I'm no AI expert, but I heavily follow artificial intelligence because it fascinates me. And I don't see a good future for OpenAI. I see a good future for Google Gemini. This could be one of those things where in a year's time I look back on this and go, wow, that was like the worst prediction ever. Like maybe OpenAI does come out with GPT-5 and it's like ridiculously mind-blowing, and maybe they've got some sort of video generation model or something. Who knows? But I just don't see it right now, and so, you know, I'm not one to buy into unsubstantiated rumors, I like to think. And I don't know, I have much more faith in Google than I do OpenAI. Am I a fool for that? Time will tell. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know, I wouldn't mind if OpenAI stayed the king. You know, I kind of like the idea of a small company going against these giant established behemoths and winning and coming out on top. I wouldn't mind it. I just don't see it happening. We'll see. Which brings us on lastly to the wild card, number 5. Gavin Newsom will be elected the 47th president of the USA. Neither Trump, Biden, DeSantis, Sanders, or any other popular candidate today will become the next American president, as Gavin Newsom, the American psycho himself, will snatch the presidency from the shadows. Chance of happening? 10%. Yeah, so this is obviously my wild card. Gavin Newsom becoming president of the United States. This is something that pretty much no one expects, and I don't really expect it to happen. I think it's very unlikely, but I've put it in here anyway because it is possible. I mentioned let's take a look at the political candidates, right, in America, like Biden. As we spoke about earlier, Biden's old, really old. He doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He wouldn't make it, he's just done for, as a candidate, in my opinion. Kamala Harris, very unpopular. I don't see her being the president, and I think if she was the president, America would just kind of be a bit of a disaster. What else have we got? We got Sanders. Again, Sanders is also pretty old, and the Democratic Party have kind of, from what I've been able to gather, correct me if I'm wrong, have kind of rigged it twice against him, so he's not going to win. So, third time's the charm. I find that very unlikely. What about on the Republican side? Trump. Yeah, I mean, it's possible Trump could be the president. It wouldn't surprise me. However, Trump is very unpopular, obviously with the progressives, and so if Trump won again, they would only be emboldened and radicalized for 4 more years. But people are radicalized and angry against Biden and the Democrats, so it wouldn't surprise me. Oh, and the rest are kind of like a joke. The only other one I like is Ramaswamy. I actually like Ramaswamy a lot. The rest just seem like sort of they've come out of 2004. I don't even think they're worth listing. I don't think Ramaswamy has a chance in 2024, but I like him. And then you've got Newsom. And Newsom's kind of like, from what I can see, is a terrible governor, but he kind of has the Trudeau effect, the Ken doll effect, if you know what that means. The Ken doll effect is kind of like, well, you've got a man who is kind of attractive, and then they attract like female voters because they're much more likely to support a political candidate if he looks good and they can imagine themselves with them. Men don't ironically don't think the same way about female political candidates, believe it or not. But women do, and so Newsom kind of has the looks factor. He's kind of well spoken. I don't know. He's kind of the only one who's not like 90, as well, for the most part. So I don't know. Newsom, if I was a Democratic strategist, which thankfully I'm not, because that would be a very sad life indeed. Picking Newsom to be the next stand-in seems like a no-brainer, even if he has a terrible record. He's kind of like the American Psycho. The more you study Newsom, the more fascinating he is. Like the way his mannerisms, the way he speaks to people, the way he operates. He is like the American Psycho. He is like the perfect Democratic candidate. And I think the American public would unfortunately eat him up. So it's unlikely. It's probably going to be Biden versus Trump. But screw it. I'm going to say it's possible that Newsom will win. Even if I wouldn't want him to. I think the Americans deserve a better leader than that. But screw it. I'm going to say Newsom will be the next president. Keep in mind, however, when it comes to American elections, I'm always wrong. So I thought Hillary would win in 2016, Trump won, which I was happy about, but still. I thought Trump would win in 2020, Biden won. So I'm always wrong. So who knows? I say it'll be Newsom. It'll probably be Ramaswamy. But we'll see. Good luck, America, put it that way. So there you have it, my 2024 predictions, and we'll check back next year to see how no doubt 100% right I was about all of these. But in the meantime, I also once again asked you all how you think the year to come will be. And this time, 23% of you said it will be amazing, 26% said it will be decent, 30% said it will be meh, and 21% said it will be awful. Which is, once again, somewhat balanced. In the end, I suppose that only time will tell. For now, however, can you get me out this damn ball? It's cold in here, man.